Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 273, and because it's Christmas Day, we're going to talk about the Christmas Truce of 1914. So Time.com says that one good thing that they say is that the Christmas truce of 1914 was an act of subversion. They talk about it as if it was just a one-day, single-day affair. It was sporadic and wasn't widespread. The story of the Christmas truce doesn't really come to us from any official channel, but rather comes from the memoirs, diaries, letters from the front, from soldiers who actually witnessed the Christmas truce back in 1914. 1914 was the first year of World War One. And I've talked about it before, how a lot of people were really enthusiastic and looking forward to the opportunity of killing evil people, the enemy, who they were taught were truly evil and deserved to die. John V. Denson wrote on the Mises Daily, and it's great. He has two different articles on the Christmas truce of World War One, and for the last few years, Mises Daily has reposted his articles. The one article from 2023, he cites a lot from Stanley Weintraub from his book Silent Night, the story of the World War One Christmas truce. And it's interesting, right? Because it's a much more detailed telling of the story. It starts around December 19th of 1914. So it's not just a single day, but there is an account that it was a fortnight, which from my understanding is 2 weeks. So there's a quote from a soldier which says, "Never was I so keenly aware of the insanity of war." And then there's another quote from Sir H. Kingsley Wood in 1930, who was a major at the time in 1914. And he said that he was there at the front trenches on Christmas 1914. He said that he took part in what was well known at the time as a truce. We went over in front of the trenches and shook hands with many of our German enemies. A great number of people now think we did something that was degrading, refusing to presume that, he went on. The fact is that we did it, and I then came to the conclusion that I have held very firmly ever since, that if we had been left to ourselves, there would never have been another shot fired. For a fortnight, there it is, the truce went on. We were on the most friendly terms, and it was only the fact that we were being controlled by others that made it necessary for us to start trying to shoot one another again. He blamed the resumption of the war on the grip of the political system, which was bad, and I and others who were there at the time determined there and then never to rest until we had seen whether we could change it. But they could not. Denson goes on, this is from the Mises Daily, he goes on and says that this nationalistic mindset, which so many people, we use that word a lot, but only to identify certain people that we don't like. It's a pejorative that, much like the word greed or racist, but the reality is that all of us are greedy, all of us are racist, and so therefore all of us to a certain level are nationalistic. And so it's a kind of a meaningless term, but it, because of the way that people use language these days, it now serves as a pejorative. Yeah, we're all nationalists, but you're a bad nationalist, right? Yeah, we're all racist, but you're a bad racist. We're all greedy, but those particular greedy people need to die. This kind of pejorative, inciting of violence and hatred kind of stuff. And so Denson talks about how this nationalistic idea was basically solidified in the United States because of the war between the states, which some people will call the Civil War. Nationalism fostered the idea that self-sacrifice for the greater good, uh, is an ideal which everyone should strive for. You can die a hero. And there is nothing greater than dying for one's country. Then you hear even today those expressions, freedom isn't free, thank you for your service. You hear all this stuff, glorifying this whole aspect of war. I know people who wanted to go in the military just so that they can hear people say to them, thank you for your service. How wonderful, and there's much more in that article. And I've watched Joyeux Noel, which is French for Merry Christmas. Great movie, probably maybe some artistic license, but nevertheless, I think conveys the kind of feeling that we should have when we think about war. So instead of going to how wonderful and an opportunity for glory that war is, it would be so much better if we would remember or have images from that movie of how wasteful it is and how utterly disgusting and sick the whole idea of war is. And how wonderful it would be if people could remember this and stop fighting, right? And of course, as I talked about recently, Sun Tzu talks about this as well, that you have to get people riled up, you know, so crazy angry that you are willing to take other people's lives without thinking, right? Without consideration that these people are just like you, right? And so there has to be a very tight control of information. This is why misinformation is a big deal for the government, because misinformation is actually, the truth, or at least more subjectivities, more parts of the story, which undermines the effort for the United States, for many people in the US, to support violence and killing all over the world, to be insensitive to the murder of women and children uh, all over the place. So, if the government was able to control information in this way, or was not, then really the only people joining the military would be sociopaths and psychopaths, right? Would there be enough of them? I think so. In which case, do you really want to have this military in your country, right? Because then the government, of course, can use them against their own population, which is why we have posse comitatus, or maybe we still have posse comitatus, which is basically a law that says the U.S. military cannot operate on domestic soil. Now, going back to the Christmas piece, there are conflicting accounts, right? Like time.com and other places want to pass it off as, something isolated, confined to a single day. And they want to emphasize the fact that in other places on the battlefield, people were killing each other, right? That there was battles happening, that some people, even who wanted to have some sort of truce, were shot dead. Rather than having that idea being entertained. So you have these conflicting accounts, right? So you have on the one side, people saying that it's isolated, it was just, very brief. And then on the other side, you have accounts where the number of soldiers that participated were up to 100,000 soldiers, right? 50,000 soldiers on both sides. Now, I don't know if that number, if it's true, would have made it extremely difficult for the high command, for generals, for governments to continue to prosecute the war. So I don't know if it was 100,000, but I'm sure that it was not isolated, judging by these letters. It wasn't isolated and it wasn't brief. Um, so there are soldier accounts from at least several different units, and so you know that it's many, many hundreds of people that were involved and at least witnessed, this truce. So why? Because you don't want people to get wind of this. You don't want more and more people in your population to get wind of this situation, of this event, of this story, of this potential, right? I firmly believe that this is why the no fraternization rules in the military are so strictly adhered to, right? Like if you start fraternization to talk to the enemy, right? Because if you did, you wouldn't want to kill them anymore. And think about, you know, the way that we get to know each other, the way that we can develop some point of uh, contact, point of commonality, which would allow us to see a way to have a friendship. I don't know if you've seen those video shorts of how men become friends with each other, right? Like if two men pass each other uh, on the way to work every day, eventually, right? First they, pass each other without, but then you kind of like, hey, what's up? You start waving and then maybe you high five them or whatever. And then eventually you become good friends, because that's kind of how a lot of guys are, right? It doesn't take a lot for guys to build some sort of camaraderie, to find some, common interest through which you can overcome a lot of differences. Men are simple that way, and it's a wonderful thing, um, right? Because it basically says that it doesn't have to be war and violence all of the time. In other words, our perpetual state of war, this perpetual mindset of war in the United States these days is driving us to bankruptcy. It's increasing violence and hate. Um, it's making America hated by the rest of the world. I mean, even especially the war in Israel, there's just until recently with the Syrian debacle, who knows what the situation is now. But prior to that, Israel and the United States were the only two countries that were supporting the perpetuation of that war. Um, so it's an impossible situation, right? Because no one in DC, Washington, DC, is going to listen to the voters. The voters keep voting for peace, but we keep getting John McCain, right? Perpetual war. No war is a war that you can hate or turn away from. But what if governments couldn't lie to their people to trick them into war? I mean, it could be Christmas all the time. Peace, I mean, and this so-called glory of dying for country, you know, that's a myth, right? It's a piece of government propaganda as old as Thucydides' account of Pericles' funeral oration, right? No matter who you were before the war, but if you die in battle, you're a hero, right? You could be a rapist, a pedophile, but if you die in battle, you're a hero, right? And it works every generation, right? Everyone believes it for some reason. Maybe that's the way we're wired, to believe in glory and death and sacrifice. I'm hoping that we remember the lessons of the past for a better future, right? And that is the impossible hope within the impossible situation. I just want to close with this quote from Napoleon Bonaparte. It's attributed to Bonaparte. War is when your government uh, tells you who the enemy is. Revolution is when you figure it out yourself. People in Canada openly are now calling out Trudeau for treason, for selling out the people and, you know, voicing potential punishment. And we need more of that, I believe, to hold politicians accountable, to really listen to the voice of the people and do and submit to the wishes of the voters who put them into office. And if they do not, that they must suffer consequences, right? So I hope that we stop war, maybe see a little bit more of revolution, and in this way see a prosperity, a time of prosperity and peace and, you know, good relations with everybody. Um, I'm hoping that this be our future, at least for our children's sake. And that's it for today. A little short meditation, perhaps, on how things could be. I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas, or to enjoy the day at a Chinese restaurant, or to kick back and enjoy a holiday provided to you by religious fanatics, whatever. But yeah, I hope that you enjoy the day, not be too lonely. And if you are, watch a couple good movies and to get you through the day. But that's it, and I'll talk to you next time.